Man, spooky season's always just gone too soon. Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back with another wrap up, this time for October of 2025. Spooky season does seem to just kind of fly by every single year. This year, no different at all. So very, very exciting month. Lots of good things, some twists and some turns, maybe some that I did not expect, but we're going to talk about those here along the way as a wrap up. And naming my book of the month does dictate. Let's begin like usual, guys. Let's talk about what I read in the month of October. I read 4 novels, and I almost finished a 5th, but that's a November read anyway, so we'll talk about that here a little bit later. Let's see. Let's start one by one here. The Deep by Nick Cutter. Kind of let down by this one, which was really, really surprising because I really liked The Troop. I thought Troop was great. I really enjoyed Little Heaven, but The Deep, maybe I just had too much in my head that, hey, this sounds similar to Sphere by Michael Crichton, which is one of my favorite books ever. But that wasn't really I wasn't really kind of grading it against that or whatever. But the book, it was so unfocused. It was like it had a really great idea, and the author never seemed to want to stay in that idea. He wanted to flashback. He wanted to flashback to those flashbacks. He wanted to do fever dreams. He wanted to do real dreams. I don't know. Like I said, I joked in my weekly update that the book should have been called The Dream, because I never know what's going on. I really liked a lot of the backstory stuff. I just thought it went a little too long, to a point where it was just like, I want the main story. I want what's happening now. When does now happen? That's how I felt. It never really got back to that. And when it did, it was like, whatever. I think I lost interest over time because he just would not stay on target. That was my problem with it. And it really, really frustrated me. And it was sad. That one was kind of a letdown. So what I'll say is, if you didn't really like The Troop and you think that The Deep might sway you, I doubt it. I doubt this will be the book that really, really changes you, but who knows? I really like The Troop, and some people didn't, and some people really like this book, and I didn't. So Nick Cutter might just be one of those authors that's going to kind of hit different people in different ways. Did also read King Sorrow, obviously by Joe Hill, one of my most anticipated books of the year. Did it meet those expectations? I'd say mostly. Yeah, I had a really, really good time with it. Talked about it at length on the channel here recently. So I think most of you guys know how I feel about it if you have seen that video. But a very, very long book. But I do definitely think that it was a journey worth taking, especially if you're one of those fantasy fans who said, I never really kind of stuck my foot into horror. I think this would be a good transition for you because, dragon. I think a dragon in any type of a thriller horror story is going to add some kind of urban fantasy element to it. But there are more fantastical elements than just the dragon in it. So I think you guys might like it. It's not a fantasy book, but I do think that fantasy fans will really, really dig what they find with Joe Hill's return to writing full-length novels. Then we got Stolen Tongues. This one was, Stolen Tongues. I have a Stolen Tongue today. Stolen Tongues by Felix Blackwell. This was one that was kind of an indie darling because I think it started on one of those, was it Creepypasta or something like that? I didn't even know what Creepypasta was until my wife brought it up. I was like, I've never even heard of this. But Creepypasta just does like the indie horror stuff, and then he kind of did this on Reddit and actually kind of like won a competition. And the idea in Stolen Tongues is great. The execution is pretty good. You could tell the story used to be a short story and it was fluffed out into a full-length novel because it got to a point where I was like, all I'm doing is kind of watching Kay sleep at this point and watching Felix worry about her. So what was really strange about that is I felt like it kind of expanded on a short story, but then it kind of left you with some unanswered questions, and that was kind of frustrating. But as a first-time independent author, I thought this was very good. The first third of that book is legitimately creepy. I mean, I was very, 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 very creeped out. If you're one of those who really enjoys you're in the cut off from civilization in a snowy cabin, and there might be something outside hunting you. I think that might be something that you're into because the atmosphere really, really awesome. I just felt like it kind of about the 60% mark kind of ran out of gas a little bit, and then the ending wasn't the best, but it wasn't the worst. I've seen worse. I've seen better. But as a debut, I think it was very, very good. One that I'm still kind of deciding about, honestly. The Last House on Neela Street by Katrina Ward. What I said when I talked about this in the weekly update was that I tip my hat to her big time for taking a chance, for going for it. Because I can't think of another horror story that feels anything like this one. So it's very, very unique in that regard. It's definitely one of those where the twists are going to surprise you, I think, because at about the 10% mark, I was like, oh, I think I've got this figured out. He indeed did not have it figured out. This is what the narrator would say here. But it was very, very, God, what's the word? And I don't want to say meta, as it wasn't meta, but it was very, what's the word? I don't even know the word right now. It just, whatever your expectations are, just it's not going to be that. It very much subverts your expectations. That's what I'm looking for. It's like you don't read or something here, Mike. But subversion aside, I think it was a very good story, and what you thought of one character and you thought of the other character when, hey, this is the antagonist, this is the protagonist. Maybe not. Maybe not. So it is not necessarily morally gray, but it is one of those like, hey, maybe you're looking at this from a different point of view, because guys, if Unreliable Narrator was a book, The Last House on Needless Street was it. So I say I liked it enough, and I liked her courage for what she did to say, I'll read more of her stories. And I've gotten lots of recommendations for other books by her. But this one, like I said, it's one of those, you are going to really like it, or you're really not going to like it. I mean, I think it's going to be very much a divisive book in that regard. And most people I've seen seem to like it. Lots of people have talked about the audiobook performance, which again, I can't vouch for, don't know. But yeah, I think it's worth your time. And it's definitely not, I would say you don't have to be a horror fan to like it, because it's very much more of a mind F, I think, than anything else. But I recommend the book. I do recommend it, but it's definitely not going to hit for everybody. Let's put it that way. But again, she took a chance, and I do admire that. Now, I read a bulk of A Strength of the Few in October, but that's a November book, so I'm not going to really count it. I said I didn't actually get to finish that or even start that the new Philip Fracassi book, the Autumn Springs Retirement Home Massacre, because I just said I'm feeling the crunch of these review copies, and these review copies are all massive books. They're giant. And I said I've got to get really a head start on some of these, because November's nuts. November is nuts. And so I started working on Strength of Few, but I didn't finish it to November, so that's going to count towards a November book. So it's ineligible for Book of the Month, which is what we're going to talk about now, guys. There can only be one. What was my Book of the Month out of these 4 books? I don't think you're going to have a hard time figuring this one out. Shivering with anticipation, aren't you? Yeah, guys, it is without a doubt King Sorrow by Joe Hill. Now, look, this book had incredible expectations from me. I said it is not hyperbolic. I know as a fantasy fan, there are tons of great releases coming out this year that are on everyone's number one most anticipated list. This one for me was my most anticipated book of the year. Second that it was announced, I said, that is it. Because, look, I haven't been reading Joe Hill for long. Obviously, big fan of his dad. Not a shock, obviously. I read ℙ𝕦𝕣𝕉𝕗 right before I started this channel, and I really liked it. I read Heart-Shaped Box not long after, thought it was excellent. Now, for me, I read Lock and Key years ago, and Lock and Key is amazing. I thought Lock and Key was like one of the best comics ever. I've got the hardcover master editions back there. I love that story, and I recommend it to everyone. But with Joe Hill, a lot of people have been waiting, 10 years almost for a new novel from him. He's been working so much in movies, TV, and in comic books. He hasn't really been writing. Now he says he wants to get back to releasing a book every single year, and I am here for it, especially after this one, because this looks like about 10 years worth of writing. So it's one of those books where I'm like, don't let the size fool you. You really can zip through this, as I did. It's one of those where I always tell people, take your time. Who cares? Take your time. And then I run a booktube channel. I'm like, I got to get this done because of all these other review copies. But I'm saying, if you don't run a review channel, you can take your time with a book like this. You don't have to rush through it. But I think you're going to, because it is very much one of those where you just keep on wanting to turn the pages and see what happens to these 6 characters. I think this is a masterclass in character development. Don't like all the decisions he makes with some of those characters, but again, they're his characters. They're his decisions to make. They're not my characters. And that's how you know you're connected to them, is you feel like that. You feel like, why are you doing that to my character? That's how you feel as the reader, because you get very connected to them when they're all, in their late teens, early 20s, and you're going through the years with these characters, and we just keep kind of zipping through the years and seeing this pressure that they're on. And I compared it very much to Death Note. And what do you do when you have that kind of power? At first you think it's a curse. Then you think, oh, well, I'm doing the right thing. And then you start to look at it as, well, maybe this is a blessing in disguise. It's kind of my own personal dragon kind of thing. So it's a story where you look at it, you see these characters, gosh, they aren't really that likable. Man, they've got a lot of problems. Man, they're not perfect people. Because that's realistic. That's the way people are. Especially you think about that these kids have been going through this for years, in years, and knowing this secret pact that they have with this thing, and knowing that there's really no way out of it, and they can't exactly tell anybody about what's going on. You think the pressure of that is going to make you go gray before you're 25. And it's a really, really good story. Again, I understand some of the criticisms of it. I don't agree necessarily with all of them, but I will tell people it's like, if I've been telling you it's a horror fantasy book because it does have a dragon, it does have other fantastical elements in it. It's not a fantasy book. It's barely a horror book. I mean, it's got some really horrific bits in it. And guys, if you're like me and you're scared of spiders, that's all I'll say. There are some things in here that are actually genuinely scary. And you can tell Joe Hill, yes, he's a horror author. This is something different. This is very much like any kind of story where you've just got the group of kids that get into some mess and it follows them their whole lives. Like I said, it's reminiscent of his father's work. I think it is a lazy comparison. I get why it's being made because that's, the most popular of that formula, but it is very much, the young kids experience something and they take it with it their whole lives. They're still dealing with it as adults and still interacting with each other, and they're all very different. They're all so damaged and messed up, and it's because of this. Some for the better, some very, very much for the worse. And it's just a brilliant story that I think left it open if he ever wanted to revisit it again. I don't think he will. I think he kind of wants to be more like his dad, not do a ton of sequels. Maybe he might be one long series like the Dark Tower one day, if you don't count his comic book stuff as that already. But I think he kind of wants to be the standalone novel guy, and I think that's a good decision. It really is, because I think he's probably got so many great ideas that he's been bottling up for the last decade. But I called this his magnus opus. I said I think this is his best book, and you guys know I love Heart-Shaped Box. I love Lock and Key, but I think this was really, as far as storytelling, this was excellent. Very, very good. And I think if you're looking for a book to start with Joe Hill with, and the size of a novel doesn't really bother you, and you love some good character development, you love just spending time through characters' lives, this will be a grand slam for you. So it's a very good starting point for fantasy fans that want to read maybe a little bit of horror, because it's not too horrific. There's some bad things that happen in it, but it's not too horrific. It does have a dragon and other fantasy things in it. I don't want to spoil what those are for you. So I think you guys would like it a lot if you give it a try, even if that isn't your usual type of book. This is a great starting place for Joe Hill if 900-page books are not a problem for you. And as fantasy readers, I don't think 900-page books are really that big of a deal for most of you. But that is why, guys, Joe Hill, King Sorrow, book of the month for October of 2025. And it feels so good that my most anticipated book of the year met the expectations. I'm very, very excited about this. And it seems to be most people are enjoying it as well. And I'm very, very happy to hear that. How about my most popular content, guys, for the month of October? I put out 14 videos this month, which I think is actually quite impressive when you consider I left town for a week of it. But I didn't get any live streams. I'm still kind of scared to do live streams right now. Ever since that Joe Abercrombie one I had, where it just bottomed out on me, I've been kind of too scared to go back to doing a live streams yet. But I might do one here soon. Just never ever again with a big time author, because that's embarrassing for me. That's humiliating to them. Joe handled it great. Joe's an awesome guy. He has no problem entertaining on his own. But it felt so unprofessional, and I hated it so much. Most people that have watched it found it very amusing, but when you're on this end, it is not amusing. So I'll look forward to joining some other people's live streams. I think Brian Bell's doing one, his 2-year one, this Friday, and I might be over there. I might make it there on Friday. You don't know. Have to tune in. Subscribe to Brian, by the way. So how about my most popular videos from the month? Look at the top 5 here. Horror books that legitimately scared me, and the specific scene. I talk about that. That's at 23,000 views. I think I did this one because every year around spooky season, I get, Mike, what are some horror books that are actually scary? And I'm like, it kind of depends on you, because there's so much about horror that something different scares everybody. So I kind of always talk about, the kind of those subgenres within the genre. And with that, I talk about the specific scene. And I kind of do it kind of similar to that my coming of age through books video that I did, where I talk about what books really left an impression on me and helped form the person I became. This was kind of the horror version of that, because I kind of go through the years when I read it, why it was scary. And it isn't always just because, I was young. Because I say after a certain age, a horror book can't really scare you anymore, but it can make you uncomfortable. But I talk about scenes that have stuck in my brain that way. And lots of good feedback on that. And I just say I feel so relieved that I'm not the only person who still remembers that scene in Dracula, Bram Stoker's Dracula. I thought that was one of those where like nobody ever mentions that as the scariest scene of that book. And so many people in the comments were like, yes, dude, yes, that was it. So I'm happy about that. I found my people, finally. I found my people. So I think on that one, any of those books you haven't read, obviously they're highly recommended. They may not scare you. Again, it might just depend on where you're at in your life or what kind of reader you are. But I think they will have a scene or two that really just kind of stick with you a little bit. And you're thinking about for a long time after you finish reading those. Some of those, my whole life, those scenes have been sticking with me. Obviously, my King Sorrow review, to get that out on release day, that's at 19,000 reviews as of this. I've cracked the code, guys, that on single book reviews, put them out on release day. Yeah, well, it's not really I'm not really a rocket scientist on that one. But that was one I wanted to get out on release day because I know a lot of people had a lot of curiosity about that one. And I think with this, it's so rare when you get a standalone book. When you cover mostly fantasy books, it's always a sequel or book 1 of 10. It's tough to do releases or reviews for book 5 in a series, even on release day. Because if they haven't read the first 4, what do they care if book 5 is good? So it was really, really nice to have a book that is something that I think that people can get into. I just talked about it for Book of the Month, so I don't want to repeat it. But again, it's a really good starting place for Joe Hill. So I'm glad that one did well, and I hopefully did get some people. I get lots of comments in there. Lots of people saying it wasn't on their TBR, but they're checking it out now, and I hope that I did not let them down. Not far removed from Joe Hill is, of course, Stephen King. I did my Stephen King tier list, number 4, long anticipated, maybe too long, 14,000 views. Those always do really well, but it was a 3-year wait between tier list number 3 and 4. And I said I had to do that, guys, because I wanted to reread those books, because some of those that I did, they would have been in different places just going off of memory. So it was very, very important to me to reread a lot of those, because some of those, when you read them when you're 19, 20, it can be very different than reading them as an adult, So I felt like it was earned, but again, sorry it took so dang long. And hopefully that tier list video did meet your expectations. A lot of people were saying, it's a rough stretch for Stephen in that, right there, right before his accident and post-accident was kind of a rough stretch for him. But tier list number 5 is going to have some absolute bangers. That's what I like to call, like the third renaissance of King's career is what's coming up as tier list number 5. So stay tuned for that one. Author's Corner. Now this one was a lot of fun, guys. November, as you know, has some really, really heavy books, some big time releases coming out. And so back in like July, I got in touch with Christopher Rocchio, got in touch with James Islington, I got in touch with Jay Kristoff and said, all 3 of you guys have massive releases coming out in November. You guys want to get together and talk about it. And we planned that for a long time, and it was very, very difficult to get it all because 2 of those guys are in Australia, and I just told you about my live stream problems. Getting that all worked out, the logistics of it was interesting, especially since it was right there before they're all about to take off on their book tours. It was fun. So I want to thank them, obviously, for making the time to do that. I know that isn't easy this time because a lot of them are on writing crunches, and a lot of them are trying to get the writing that they can get in before they leave for the book tours because they don't get a lot of guys don't write on tours, and I can understand that. But it was really, really fun talking to them. That's at 13,000 views. Obviously, people are very excited about 1, 2, or all 3 of those books in there. But those are all 3 great, great gentlemen, and getting to hear their ideas about how they come up with stuff, some of their writing methods, some of the techniques that they use, how they deal with deadlines, have they had any bad issues with publishers, kind of what an author's corner is. It isn't just talking about your book. It's kind of talking about your experience, some advice you can give to upcoming authors, and those are 3 great and now very successful authors. And again, getting them on one video was a lot of fun. I feel like completely blessed. It's like I have these 3 amazing individuals and me, but giving those authors a platform to talk about what has made them successful is just my pleasure. I was just so happy to do it, and happy that they did join me, and that the conversation didn't go completely awful. I didn't get any bad feedback about how I cut anybody off the whole time, or I asked awful questions. And that's all you can hope for as a moderator of a discussion like that. So a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to seeing 2 of those 3 authors here again very, very soon. We've seen Jay for his event here in Dallas. I'll be hosting that event. And, of course, be hosting for Christopher's Gala here in November. Hope you guys are making it to one of those. If you are, please stop by. Say hello. We'd love to shake your hand. Say what's going on. And then From Dragons to Demons. This is horror for fantasy fans. This is at 10,000 views. Again, another question I get this time of year. I'm a fantasy fan, never really read horror. What would be a good starting place for me? So it's kind of talking about some books where I said, look, just think about it. You're taking a dragon, you turn it to a demon. I think a lot of these will have a lot of the same elements that fantasy fans like. And so there are a lot of books on there you feel like, oh, you kind of already talked about that in another video. But I think this one is more specific to readers who have only read fantasy, not read a lot of horror, but they're looking to dip their toe in. This will be a very easy transition for them going, just from just straight medieval fantasy to crazy, insane horror. No, this is a much easier transition, I think, because you can see a lot of things that make you love those fantasy books. They're in the horror books as well. And it's not as simple as replacing the dragon with a demon, as much as, that seems like it would make a lot of sense. I think I borrowed this a little bit from Brian Lee Durfee when we were talking about Lonesome Dove. And he was saying the thing with Lonesome Dove is, you could change them from cowboys with 6-shooters to, knights with swords, and the story wouldn't change a ton. I'm like, my God, you actually are right. So I think it's kind of like that in that Lonesome Dove's just S tier. Read it now if you haven't. But it's a good comparison. It's what made me think about this. And there are a lot of those same elements in some of these horror books that I read that I love in my fantasy books. I think you guys would too. So hopefully you check out some of those. How about some goals for November before I do take off here? I do have 2 events for very successful authors here. I just mentioned them, Chris Verrocchio and Jay Kristoff. And I'm absolutely honored and blessed that they asked me to be a part of these events. But now it's the part where I got to worry about, I hope I don't embarrass myself or them. Because in the end, I'm always like, hey, is there anything that you guys want me, is there any topics we discuss? And they're just like, no, let's just have a conversation. I'm like, oh boy. Yeah, so it's always up to me to not be standing there like an idiot after they finish answering a question, being like, I don't know what to ask you next. So I don't have a hard time talking, obviously. But, when it's mostly just lobbing questions and listening, sometimes that can get a little hairier. So we'll see. We'll see. But thankfully, I don't believe either of these events are being recorded. So hopefully you guys don't see me make an ass of myself if that does happen. That's a very important goal for me. Don't make an ass of yourself. Start gearing up for that end of year content, including 2026 plans. I got to talk about some standalones I'm going to read next year. Got to nail down those new series I'm going to start. I already kind of briefly spoke about. I'm going to start focusing on finishing some series instead of starting a bunch of new ones, but I still will be starting some new ones in 2026. But in the end, guys, just enjoy the holidays. This is recharge time for a lot of people. Enjoy the holidays, spend time with family, catch up on some books, enjoy some time off work if you got it. And just make sure you enjoy those moments, especially you got young kids, because I'm starting to get to that point. My kids get bigger every year, and I'm like, we went on trick or treat, and I was like, I don't think we've got very many of these left. They're getting very, very big, and the oldest one does his on his own now, and pretty soon the youngest one's going to go do his on his own or go with his brother. They're not going to need us anymore, So enjoy those things, those moments while they're there, guys. Make sure you make that a priority. That's always a goal for me outside the channel, obviously, is be present for your family. I hope you guys do the same. So guys, what did October look like for you? What was your book of the month? Are you gonna check this out? I hope you do. Hope you have. I hope you have something to say about them in the comments below. So hit me there, guys, and I'll talk to you there.